The first ever Hell in a Cell match held at Bad Blood in Your House in 1997 is not only my favourite Hell in a Cell match that the WWE ever produced, but it's also one of my favourite matches of all time. I've talked about the bout in previous videos, but I've never took the time to explain how the match came to be. I've never talked about why the Hell in a Cell was introduced, and I've never talked about the finer details of the Bad Blood main event that make this match so special. So today I'm going to look at the Undertaker vs Shawn Michaels Hell in a Cell match in depth, and hopefully I can convey why I think this legendary showdown is so good and why I think it's the best cell match in WWE history. So what we'll do here is look at the build up towards Bad Blood first of all, we'll then look at the match itself, and finally we'll look at how it all came together. The Undertaker's rivalry with Shawn Michaels began at SummerSlam 1997. Bret Hart was challenging The Undertaker for the WWF Championship, and Shawn Michaels got himself booked as the special guest referee. Shawn hadn't been involved in the WWF title picture since losing his smile back in February of 97, but he did have a short tag team title run with Stone Cold Steve Austin. HBK was in the middle of reigniting his feud with the Hitman Bret Hart, so Bret was obviously concerned about how Shawn would referee this match at SummerSlam. WWF higher-ups, in storyline of course, said that Shawn had to call the SummerSlam main event right down the middle. If HBK favoured The Undertaker during the match, and if he refused to count a pinfall, then Shawn would get fired from the WWF. Towards the end of the match, Bret spat on Michaels and Shawn threw a wild chair shot at the Hitman. Bret ducked out of the way and Shawn ended up smashing The Undertaker's skull with the chair. Bret then pinned The Undertaker, and Shawn realised that he had to count the pinfall or else he was done for. Shawn counted The Undertaker's shoulders to the mat, and Bret became the WWF champion. This was a superb match finish, by the way. It was very unique, and I don't think the WWE has tried to recreate it, thankfully. So now The Undertaker was coming after Shawn Michaels for costing him the WWF Championship, and HBK felt that the fans were blaming him for standing up for himself during the SummerSlam main event. Shawn said the WWF fans were dumping this whole thing on his lap, but in the end, Shawn really doesn't care what anyone thinks of him. The plan here was to have Shawn turn heel, and this led to the creation of D-Generation X. While all this was going on, Paul Bearer was also telling The Undertaker that the Phenom's little brother was coming for the dead man, so the Phenom was going through a pretty rough time during the summer of 1997. Shawn and Hunter Hearst Helmsley teamed up to take on Mankind and The Undertaker on Raw's War, and the match ended with Shawn destroying Taker again with a steel chair. From this point onwards, Shawn would become associated with Triple H, Chyna and Rick Rude, and Shawn's on-screen character would get more juvenile as the weeks went on. The Undertaker, meanwhile, was seeking revenge, and at the Ground Zero pay-per-view held on September 7th, 97, the Phenom would get his hands on Michaels in the main event. Shawn vs Taker would headline the show in a singles match. The bout was riddled with referee bumps and interference, and in the end, there was no clear winner. Shawn was saved due to outside interference, and the match ended in a no contest, meaning the feud would continue into the following month's pay-per-view. The natural assumption then is that some sort of stipulation or match type would get incorporated to stop outside interference, but the WWF went one step beyond. The next night on Raw, the Hell in a Cell match was announced by Vince McMahon during an interview with The Undertaker. Vince said that a giant cage would surround the perimeter of the ring and there's going to be a roof on the cage. The Undertaker said that Shawn Michaels had just opened the gates of hell and Hell in a Cell will be the beginning of the end for the Heartbreak Kid. Once locked inside the cell, there's no way in for Shawn's friends and there's no way out for HBK. Shawn interrupted the promo from the Titantron. HBK said he's a survivor and at Hell in a Cell, he will survive once again. What's notable here is that nothing else was really explained. The Hell in a Cell announcement came out of nowhere. The following week, The Undertaker interrupted a Shawn Michaels promo, and the Phenom was talking behind chicken wire, and we assumed this would be used for the Bad Blood cage match. This type of cage was more associated with the NWA and WCW, whereas the WWF were known for the big blue cage, so this was going to be something different for sure. As Shawn continued to take the low road in the weeks that followed, we would see footage of the Hell in a Cell being constructed. Jim Ross said that this will be the most dangerous cage in the history of the wrestling business, while Vince McMahon put over the fact that Shawn won't have any help at Bad Blood. This thing was being built so there would be no outside interference. Michaels was the European champion by the time Bad Blood came around on October 5th, 1997, but the European title would not get defended inside Hell in a Cell. Instead, the winner of this match would face the WWF champion at the 1997 Survivor Series. Shawn cuts a promo before the bout, and HBK says his God-given talent will be enough to make it through the Hell in a Cell. HBK being as arrogant as ever here. Before the cell gets lowered, Commissioner Slaughter and Earl Hebner check under the ring to ensure there's nobody under there. This is going to be one-on-one, and Shawn will have no help once the bell rings. HBK comes out first and he looks extremely confident. The cell begins to lower while Shawn and DX are in the ring, and when The Undertaker's music begins to play, the other members of D-Generation X get out of the ring to leave Shawn all on his own. The Undertaker makes his way to the ring, and as soon as The Undertaker makes the lights come on in the arena, Shawn wants out. His demeanour has completely changed. He rushes to the door to try to get out, but it's no use. He's stuck inside hell with The Undertaker. The Undertaker takes his time stalking Shawn around the ring. The Phenom looks like he's going to savour this, and he's going to enjoy ripping Shawn to pieces. HBK gets in the ring and he comes off the ropes only to get met with a big boot from The Undertaker. Jim Ross immediately says that this isn't going to be pretty as Shawn hits the mat hard. The Undertaker hits Shawn's head off the turnbuckle pads as Michaels still tries to get out of the ring. It isn't until Taker goes for an early chokeslam when Shawn realises he has no other alternative. He has to fight back. HBK thinks he's doing a pretty good job until Taker launches Shawn into the corner. Shawn takes the Ric Flair bump and Taker hits a big clothesline. The audience are kinda unsure what to make of it so far, but as Shawn and Taker begin turning up the heat, the crowd in St. Louis ends up going completely nuts. The Undertaker's movements are deliberately slow as Shawn continues to take punishment. The dead man wants to take his time here and he wants to savour it. Taker hits old school and he begins choking Shawn with his boot. Body slams and leg drops follow from the dead man, and Shawn's feet even hit the ceiling when he takes a back body drop. The Undertaker then tosses Shawn out of the ring with force, and now the cell is going to come into play in a much more physical manner. The Undertaker chokes Shawn while HBK's back is against the cage. Shawn breaks free for a brief moment and he again tries to get away. This time he tries to climb the cell, but there's nowhere to go. Shawn gets thrown into the cell and he bounces into a right hand from the dead man, not once, but twice. Taker then goes to powerbomb Shawn, but in an act of desperation, Shawn grabs the cage and he's able to lay in a few punches, but it's not enough to stop The Undertaker. Shawn gets his back drilled into the cell before The Undertaker literally rams Shawn from pillar to post, smashing Shawn's back into the corner of the cell and the ring post. Again, a glimmer of hope comes for Shawn when he manages to ram Taker into the cell, but The Undertaker fires right back with a clothesline. It seems like Shawn hasn't got a hope in hell of winning this match. A misstep from The Undertaker allows Shawn to once again try and gain some sort of control. HBK mounts the dead man and a series of punches gets delivered, and then Shawn gets back inside the ring, which, strangely enough, has become the safest place where Shawn can go. After bumping Taker off the ring apron, Shawn decides to try his luck with a suicide dive, and it connects. Realising his athleticism could maybe serve him well here because fist fighting with The Undertaker has got him nowhere, Shawn climbs up the cell and he delivers an elbow drop, and he follows up with a diving clothesline from the ring apron. Shawn then attacks The Undertaker with the steel steps, and afterwards, Shawn hits a piledriver on the lower part of the steps, one of the better spots of the match. Shawn then gets frustrated with one of the cameramen inside the cage. Keep this in mind as it comes into play again very soon. A double X handle from the top rope to the outside gets delivered from HBK as the commentators say that this is slowly turning into hell for The Undertaker. Shawn then grabs a steel chair. Remember, it was the steel chair at SummerSlam that started this whole rivalry, and HBK hits The Undertaker across the back. Shawn sets the chair down, but he then has second thoughts. If he's going to win this match, then he has to get vicious. So HBK takes the chair one more time and The Undertaker takes another hit across the back. HBK goes for the pin and he only gets a 2 count. He can't believe Taker kicked out and he can't believe the match has to continue. Undertaker begins fighting back, but Shawn traps his opponent's arms between the top and middle ropes. HBK's master plan leads to nothing as The Undertaker breaks free and Shawn gets sent over the top rope. On his way down, Shawn hits the cameraman again and HBK is now pissed off. The cameraman gets attacked on the outside and there's a legitimate hush in the arena when this happens. Fans didn't know if Shawn was really upset with this poor guy. It was all a work though. Shawn hits the flying forearm, he hits the elbow drop, and he begins tuning up the band for sweet chin music. The super kick finds its mark, but The Undertaker sits right back up after taking Shawn's finisher. Shawn then realises that Commissioner Slaughter has ordered the cage door to be opened to allow the cameraman to get out of harm's way, and Shawn takes this opportunity to escape the cage. The Undertaker follows, and so begins the second part of this Hell in a Cell match. This is when it went from great to excellent. Shawn tries to fight The Undertaker off on the outside of the cell, but it's no use. The Undertaker is able to catapult Shawn into the cage face first, and if you look closely, you'll see Shawn blading here. Michaels actually blades right up until his face hits the cage, and Shawn gets instant colour following the move. Taker then rams Shawn into the cage 2 more times before Shawn hits a low blow. Wanting some kind of escape, Shawn begins climbing the cage and you think Taker is about to pull Shawn down, but no, Shawn climbs onto the roof of the Hell in a Cell and The Undertaker follows him. The crowd goes nuts at this sight. It was something the WWF had never done before, and it really felt like there was a high element of danger to all of this. Shawn tries to hit a piledriver, but The Undertaker reverses with a backdrop as blood falls onto the camera inside the ring. Shawn tries to roll away, but The Undertaker gives chase, and then the dead man hits a press slam on top of the cell, and for a moment you really thought Shawn was going through the cage. Remember, we obviously hadn't seen the Mankind vs Taker match, no one knew how safe it was up there, and when the support beam started bending and the chicken wire was getting stretched out, you legitimately thought that it was going to give way at any minute. The Undertaker punches Shawn and HBK goes to the edge of the cell. He tries to get down, but The Undertaker stops him halfway. Taker then stomps on Shawn's hands, and Shawn goes crashing through the Spanish announce table set up at ringside. Again, this is downplayed a little due to the Mankind Cell match, but seeing it live was incredible. And who can forget Jerry Lawler screaming the word incoming as Shawn crashed through the table? The Undertaker looks on as Shawn lays in a pool of his own blood, but there's absolutely no letting up here. The Undertaker throws Shawn on top of the French announce table before slamming him to the ground. The match isn't over yet. The Undertaker brings Shawn back into the cell and the door gets locked again. The decimation of Shawn Michaels continues at Bad Blood. The Undertaker sets Shawn up and the Phenom delivers a chokeslam from the top rope. Jim Ross says it's just a matter of time before the WWF's most arrogant superstar gets put out of commission for good. Blood drips from Shawn's head and onto the ring mat as the Undertaker grabs a steel chair. The dead man maybe wanted to give Shawn a little poetic justice. Shawn takes a vicious chair shot and the Undertaker signals for the tombstone. As the dead man approaches his victim, the lights in the arena go out, and we hear a haunting church organ. The entranceway gets soaked in red lights as Paul Bearer walks out with Kane, the Undertaker's little brother. Kane's debut had been teased for months and all signs pointed to the debut happening at Bad Blood, but when I watched this live, I was so engrossed in the Hell in a Cell match that I completely forgot all about Kane. This was really the last thing I was expecting. Kane rips the cage door off the hinges and a stare down takes place in the ring between The Undertaker and his little brother. The Undertaker shows emotion in his face, something we really hadn't seen before, and Kane goes on to tombstone the dead man before leaving the ring. Shawn crawls over, he puts an arm on The Undertaker, and the referee slowly counts to 3. HBK wins the very first Hell in a Cell match, but he doesn't look like a winner at all as Chyna and Triple H carry HBK out of the arena. Shawn said of the finish and the debut of Kane, "The costume, the entrance, it was all so awe-inspiring. It was really the only way we could end that match because we done so many amazing things and you have to top it off with something equally or more impressive. The debut, the flames and his presence are what carried that." Out Kane goes and I drape an arm over The Undertaker. You could hear the gasp in the building. When it goes like that and you know you've hit it out of the park, it's a grand slam home run when they are like, oh my god, he's going to win. Talk about the stars aligning and everything falling into place. The booking of this match was simply impeccable and there were so many things that made this all work. First, there's the cell itself and what it meant for Shawn Michaels to get locked inside this structure with The Undertaker. Shawn's character was cocky and brash, and this was the character that walked down the ramp at Bad Blood. When Shawn got locked inside the cell, however, his cockiness and confidence started slipping away as HBK began to panic and looking for a way out. It's like a wave of anxiety came over Shawn as soon as he got inside the cell and it freaked him out. Shawn's character lent itself to this match type. The insufferable little show-off was now going to have to face some harsh consequences for his actions, and it's going to happen in the very worst way possible. And then you have The Undertaker, and The Undertaker was like a lion locked inside a cage with its prey. The dead man stalked Shawn around the ring in such a cold and methodical way that it almost felt like he was playing with his opponent, letting that fear rise and rise until Shawn had no other choice but to fight back. The Undertaker said, "That's what was so good about Shawn. Yeah, Shawn was ahead of his time with all the things he could do physically and he took advantage of that at the right time, but when it came down to it, when it came down to knucks, you believed him. Whether he was a little shit heel or a babyface, when it came down to a fight, you believed him. There are only a few guys you can identify with that had that. Shawn Michaels could have a great match with a broomstick." To me, when you really think about it, there's no other two men that could have pulled this off in 1997. Their gimmicks and personas lent themselves to this cat and mouse chase that happened inside the cage, and it was pulled off incredibly well. When it was time to fight and when there was no other choice, Shawn put his hands up and he went for it, but the dead man stayed on Shawn's tail until Kane showed up. It took an outside force to stop The Undertaker destroying Michaels, and even this finish played into the characters of not only Kane and The Undertaker, but Shawn too. HBK didn't beat The Undertaker, Kane did that for him, but that won't stop the cocky Shawn Michaels from going to Raw and taking credit and going on to the 1997 Survivor Series to face the WWF Champion. So many variables at work here and everything worked, from The Undertaker's brooding character, Shawn's arrogant nature, the story told in the ring, the debut of Kane, and the cell structure itself. The very first Hell in a Cell really was a perfect storm that hasn't been replicated since. The cell was more than just a cage here, it had a profound effect on the competitors. While the Hell in a Cell played mind games with the Heartbreak Kid and it caused his fight or flight response to kick in, it became a killing ground for The Undertaker. There's been a little confusion as to who came up with the Hell in a Cell idea. Shawn Michaels initially took credit for the match when he was interviewed for his From the Vault DVD collection. Shawn said he remembered seeing Buzz Sawyer versus Tommy Rich at the Omni, the last battle of Atlanta, and this match featured a cage with a roof. Shawn said he suggested this steel structure to Vince McMahon, and the next thing he knows, the Hell in a Cell is being built. Well, Jim Cornette has completely shot this down on a few occasions while saying it was actually his idea. And I believe Jim here because Cornette can also recall the inspiration of the Kane debut, which in turn was the main reason for the creation of Hell in a Cell. In regards to how Kane debuted, Jim Cornette said, "It was a combination of Kevin Sullivan ideas and things I had already seen. The Hell in a Cell cage was the old Memphis cage where it encompassed the entire ringside area, and it was the War Games cage because it had the top on it. And how did Kevin Sullivan introduce Doug Furnas as a babyface on Christmas night of '87 in Knoxville? When the heels were beating up the babyface, here comes Doug Furnas and he rips the door off the cage. It had never been done since." And right enough, here's the footage of Doug Furnas ripping off the cage door to save an official from a Kevin Sullivan beatdown in Knoxville. Cornette said in a separate interview, "I hated the old-fashioned WWF cage with the blue bars. Chain link fence looks rough. Blue bars look gaga to me. I loved War Games because the cage has a top. You can't climb over the top. J.J. Dillon got hurt in the War Games. The Road Warriors were trying to do their finish, but Hawk had to modify it because the top was too low. So Hawk came off at a different angle and he separated JJ's shoulder. Sid powerbombed Brian Pillman on his head because his feet hit the top of the cage. So I said, make it bigger. Make it like the one in Memphis where it surrounds the ringside area too so guys can come off the top. Nobody can get in or out, which is all the more reason why it gets heat when the heel gets in." We were able to say that this was going to be the big climactic match between The Undertaker and Shawn Michaels. Two men were going to enter, but there was no escape, no way in and no way out. Somebody had to win, somebody had to lose, and there was absolutely no way for Shawn Michaels to escape the ass kicking that The Undertaker was going to give him, and he didn't. Shawn wasn't the one who breached the cage. At the worst possible moment for The Undertaker, his brother appears. Also, The Undertaker said on his second Broken Skull sessions that the cell was indeed built with Kane's debut in mind. Taker said, "We were killing two birds with one stone here. Shawn and I had been working with continual interference from Triple H in China. They kept interjecting themselves. That's kinda the setup as to why there's going to be a Hell in a Cell. But the main reason for the Hell in a Cell is for Kane. It's all about Kane. It's all designed for Kane's debut. You're gonna keep all outside interference out, and boom, here comes Kane." And that was the very first Hell in a Cell match that took place on a WWF pay-per-view. The Bad Blood 97 main event will always remain one of my favourite matches of all time, and it's one of those matches I remember watching live so well because of the roller coaster it put viewers on. Sure, the Mankind vs Taker match had more insane spots, but the way the Cell was introduced as both a physical threat and a mentally draining challenge for its competitors at Bad Blood makes it stand out way more for me. HBK, of course, came out of the match bragging about how he survived the match and The Undertaker, and Shawn would go on to challenge Bret Hart in their infamous Survivor Series match. As for The Undertaker, he would have to come to terms with fighting his own flesh and blood, and this was given a nice slow build towards WrestleMania 14. Needless to say, this one needs to be seen in its entirety to fully appreciate it, and if you keep in mind that it's the very first of its kind, I guarantee you'll enjoy it even more. Thanks for watching and take care.